The POCO C65 is one of the most budget of budget smartphones you can buy right now that's recently been released. And when you look at budget technology in general, you often associate it with good overall performance and then a budget price. One of those 2 points is true for the POCO C65, and actually it's probably one of the first instances of us reviewing technology here on Now and Then Tech that we are actually thinking this is probably a bit too budget. Yes, that is possible. Let us show you why in this review when we look at price, performance, build, spec, as well as camera, and an overall assessment of what the POCO C65 offers for its $170 price tag. So let's talk performance and generally specification of the POCO C65. Let's look at the specs first. So you get 6 GB of RAM, 120 GB of storage, HD plus 6.7 inch 90 Hz panel, 5000 mAh battery. Now on paper, it ticks all the boxes, it sounds great, and you hit all those milestones that you'd expect from a budget smartphone. When you run gaming, however, you got Call of Duty running on the most basic level specs, because if you download the high-end specs, it ain't happening, let's be honest. On those low-level specs, the performance isn't good. You get a lot of slowdown, a lot of judder, and a lot of ghosting as well, which is a shame because we've tested phones in a similar price bracket to this, which we'll touch on later in this review, and you don't get those issues. Here you do. Even if you move away from gaming for something less intensive, like browsing or just general use of the device, again, the software is categorized into certain sections, etc., but you still get that slowdown and that judder. It's infrequent, but it does happen, and it's a shame considering you get quite a lot of RAM at 6 GB, 120 GB of storage, Helio G85 processor. All that on paper looks great, but actually the performance of the POCO C65, when you're actually using it, and we're not even really jamming it full of stuff, isn't that good, which is a shame. So let's talk screen and then sound. So C65 from POCO, 6.7 inch HD plus screen. So on paper, you look at it and it is, from the front to the display, as you can see, with those borders, etc., is a budget smartphone. So you get quite a decent sized chin at the bottom and the borders are pretty thick. Front facing camera, bank center in the middle. However, video, etc., on this actually is pretty good. You get decent color reproduction from that LCD panel, and then content watching, so whatever you want to watch on that 5000 mAh battery, will actually run you quite a good amount of screen on time. So it's pretty good for traveling. It'll charge reasonably quickly at 18 watts, which is what you'd expect at a budget tech. But generally speaking, content on this phone is pretty great. If you combine content and sound, so you're taking video and sound, then it's a different story. Sound itself is not going to be great. It fires singularly from the bottom speaker and it's a little bit tinny, but it is loud, if that means anything to you. You're not gonna get the best quality, but it's quite loud. So this kind of ticks off the budget side of the POCO C65, and it's what we expect across the entirety of the range that this sits in, as well as other smartphones, something like the Honor 90 Lite, which sound and video wise will produce a much better output than a C65 and matches in terms of the battery capacity, but does offer overall better performance, which again we'll touch on later in this review when it comes to the Honor 90 Lite. So cameras, the make or break of pretty much any smartphone. You get three. One's a bit mysterious: 50 megapixel wide, 2 megapixel macro, and then a 0.8 megapixel auxiliary lens, which, believe it or not, nowhere can you find any information on what that auxiliary lens does. Based on what we've seen and researched and what we've used, it probably acts as a fake depth sensor to add more depth to portrait shots, etc. But God knows why it even exists, who knows. Anyway, let's talk about the actual output. So if you look at the various images of the POCO C65, we'll start off, it's not great for your generic normal photographer. If you're a good photographer, you're passionate about it, it's not going to be for you. Portrait shots are okay at best with a lot of skin smoothing. Front shots though do produce some nice colors, which is a nice touch. And then when you move into the night shots, well, they're not good. You get quite a lot of noise and a lot of blowout in the highlighted areas. This isn't a good producer of night shots. The dedicated macro camera does offer some decent results with good detail, but how much do you actually need a dedicated macro lens. In terms of video, 1080p, 30 FPS, serviceable, decent quality on the front and the back, both 1080p, both 30 FPS, nothing that will blow you away. And in reality, if you're looking at the POCO C65's camera lenses, they offer nothing different than the most generic of specifications. There's nothing smart, there's no AI focus here, it's just a very generic lens. So the output you're going to get is going to be basic and decent at best. So how to sum up a smartphone that on paper, based on the specs we showed you and we discussed earlier, offers so much? Well, to sum it up pretty much, on paper it looks great, the compromises are not great. So you lose out a lot in the camera systems, the performance, and the screen technology, as well as, I guess you could say, the battery tech as well. Generally speaking, there's a lot of compromises here. I'd say the biggest bugbear that we've had in our experience with the phone itself, you could probably forgo a lot of that, is the performance. There's so much slowdown here, it doesn't make sense to actually even recommend the POCO C65. So what would we actually recommend in this category is what we've touched on earlier, is spending an extra 30 to 40-ish dollars, maybe 50 at a stretch, and getting something like the Honor 90 Lite, which is a very impressive smartphone for $199. Why, you ask? Well, design is nicer, screen tech is nicer, it's more powerful, it'll charge faster, and the biggest thing for us is the camera lenses as well on the back are excellent. So that price to performance wise was actually probably the best budget smartphone we actually tested last year, because it cost 199 British pounds. This is 170 British pounds, so it's a 30 pound variance. I would pay that 30 pounds without a doubt. So the POCO C65 is, how do you sum it up? I guess you'd sum it up this way. The POCO C65 is probably the best example ever of what goes wrong when you overly compromise on technology and you try to bring that price super low without offering a key driver as a reason why you should buy it. So unfortunately, our first review of 2024 is not a great one, but keep an eye on the channel for weekly reviews. Until the next one, as always, we out.